In September 1776, a 21-year-old Nathan Hale volunteers for a dangerous mission to gather intelligence on British positions for General Washington. Hale is a captain in the newly formed Continental Army, and like so many spies in the war, has no direct espionage background or training. While observing British troop movements across Long Island, he is unknowingly being watched. Loyalist rangers have been hunting for a spy and soon catch up to him in a tavern. Robert Rogers, a famous frontiersman and leader of the Loyalist outfit, sits next to Hale and pretends to be a Patriot militiaman behind enemy lines. The two men drink, quietly toast to Congress, and share old stories. Hale, fully believing Rogers to be a friend, soon confides in him about the mission, sealing his fate. The next day, Hale is arrested and swiftly brought to British General Howe. With overwhelming evidence, his execution is assured. Spies are hanged, and Nathan Hale would be no different. Years later, his friend William Hull would attribute Hale's final words as, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." For a captured spy, Hale's execution was routine and went almost unnoticed. He would become one of hundreds of brave men and women on both sides, put to death for what was often seen as dishonorable work, but vital to the outcome of the war. This video is sponsored by the book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization. If you're watching this, the chances are you're as obsessed with the human story as I am, how we got here, what we've learnt, and what we've built along the way. That's why I'm so pleased to be sharing with you this beautifully illustrated encyclopedia packed with the most incredible inventions and discoveries from across our history. The book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization, is 400 pages and 180 topics of pure human brilliance. How do you make gunpowder, cultivate crops, build fortifications, or develop medicine? Basically a guide through human ingenuity with everything you need to start society from scratch. As you'd imagine, this is quite literally a big book, with stunning hand-drawn illustrations and detailed descriptions. Think medieval manuscripts crossed with engineering blueprints. And this isn't just for history and science buffs, or those planning for the apocalypse. This is a book for curious minds of any age. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift, or something to spark your own imagination, the book absolutely delivers. Hopefully civilization isn't ending anytime soon, but if it does, with the book at least, you'll have a great head start. Check it out using the links in the description below, and use promo code HistoryRebels to receive an additional gift, professional quality playing cards with unique hand-drawn designs. In the 18th century, there were three main types of spies. The first were military scouts on temporary missions, or brave local informants, often behind enemy lines and without uniforms. The second were the respectable diplomats working in capital cities, mostly ambassadors and princes, passing discreet pieces of intelligence over dinner. The third, and most contemptible to those at the time, were the men who sold secrets and betrayed their colleagues for pay. Throughout the American Revolution, both sides made use of a wide variety of tactics and agents. Perhaps the highest volume of information, and the least trusted, came from civilians. As this was as much a civil conflict as it was a war between nations, locals provided constant and significant support to both sides. Men and women had to consider conflicting allegiances and moral dilemmas of betraying friends and family for a greater cause, while also contending with the looming prospect of discovery and execution. To counter the threat, both sides ruthlessly hanged suspected spies, often on flimsy evidence. Men and women from behind enemy lines passed daring reports and embarked on dangerous missions for their cause. From New York, for example, the British made efforts to raise men for loyalist regiments and sent out agents to travel the countryside, often working with local sympathisers. These missions were incredibly dangerous, and if caught, the agents and those sheltering them would be sent to the gallows. In 1 month alone in 1777, 13 loyalists went on trial in the New York area for such work, and 10 were hanged. Counterintelligence operations were often crude but effective. In friendly territory, agents on both sides acted as agent provocateurs to root out enemy factions. In May 1777, for example, Simon Newell, working in Patriot-held territory, pretended that he wanted to join the British cause at a dinner party. By the end of the night, and after toasting to the king, Simon had learnt the names of a number of secret loyalists, including a prominent member of the local Patriot Committee of Safety. Arrests quickly followed. For most of the war, Continental intelligence operations were superior to their British rivals. Washington in particular appreciated the importance of espionage and the need for multiple sources of intelligence which could be subsequently analysed by a dedicated staff. British commanders, being the product of a conventional military establishment, mostly acted as their own head of intelligence, and much preferred and trusted army scouts over local informants when it came to understanding continental movements and strength. In European campaigns, armies marched on well-defined roads between depots, which could support their complex supply lines. This made their movements somewhat predictable. As Frederick the Great pointed out, you could often tell where an army intended to attack by discovering where they established their supply depots. Espionage was therefore limited in its application and use. However, in the vast American continent, armies and militias could live off the land, move across the countryside, and strike before vanishing once more. Possessing as much detailed knowledge on your enemy was therefore far more important to a commander in America than Europe, something the Continentals understood far better than the British. Washington also implemented a variety of deception operations. Before British prisoners were released, they might see a Continental unit marching around camp, who would quickly change formation when out of sight before marching around once more to give the impression of a much larger force. On one occasion, a suspected loyalist was invited to dine at Washington's camp, where inflated roster reports were accidentally left on a desk for him to find and read, numbers which were promptly reported back to the British. The secret war also went far beyond the Americas, with France in particular becoming a centre of plots and political manoeuvring by diplomats and aristocrats. The American Commission in Paris aimed to establish a treaty of alliance against Britain, but they would also engage in other covert actions as well. This included spreading propaganda or organising paramilitary activities such as privateers attacking British shipping or raids against Great Britain itself. But in the capital of their arch-rival, the British too had a well-manned spying operation and would, almost immediately, completely penetrate Benjamin Franklin's commission. With no intelligence manuals to follow, for both sides their intelligence operations took time to mature. Commanders had to quickly develop their own methods for recruiting agents, discovering enemy networks, verifying intelligence, and much more. Both would attempt similar techniques, the use of alphanumeric codes, for example, where words are converted into digits to hide their meaning. Majors Benjamin Talmadge and John Andre working as the Continental and British spy chiefs respectively, both attempted versions of this code and made the same mistakes. In early attempts, listing words alphabetically instead of randomly, making it easy to crack. Washington, particularly after the British captured New York in '76, was in desperate need of reliable intelligence on his enemy to compensate for his worsening military situation. Capturing New York had given the British a strategic advantage. The port gave them a base to strike out from as they pleased. Washington therefore needed timely intelligence on British plans so that he could accurately predict rather than react to their movements. After early attempts at gathering intelligence returned mixed results, by 1778, Washington and Talmadge began establishing a new spy ring. This new network, called the Culper Ring, would soon become perhaps the best known and most effective of the war. Robert Townsend would gather intelligence in New York and pass it to Abraham Woodhull in Long Island. From there, messages were smuggled across to Connecticut and then relayed to Washington. They used invisible ink, coded messages, numerical aliases, and even developed prearranged signals, like hanging laundry in certain patterns to avoid detection. By 1780, the war in the North was at a stalemate, and the Culper Ring would soon need to prove its worth. The main French fleet and army in North America, under Count Rochambeau, was quietly on its way north to coordinate with Washington and planned to land at Rhode Island, only recently abandoned by the British. But General Clinton has caught wind of the plans. Weeks before the French fleet arrived, a newly turned asset within Washington's inner circle had passed on details of the French movements, and the British were planning a welcome party. 8,000 troops and a sizable fleet were preparing to leave New York and ambush the French soon after their arrival. Such a surprise attack could effectively knock France out of the North American theatre of war, ending hopes for future Franco-American coordination and leaving the Continentals to fight on alone. Townsend, from Washington's Culper Ring, moves in well-informed loyalist circles in the city. From his contacts, he is able to learn of the British plans and immediately passes the information back through the network to Washington. The French are then immediately informed and fortify their positions. Clinton, furious after learning he no longer holds the element of surprise, cancels the operation in a devastating blow delivered by the Culper Ring, and the French are frustratingly left free to begin planning new operations with Washington. Clinton had one other trick up his sleeve for 1780. The spy in Washington's inner circle was none other than General Benedict Arnold. Arnold's military achievements were well known and admired, having fought valiantly at Ticonderoga, Quebec, and Saratoga. But while recovering from a leg wound received at Bemis Heights, he grew increasingly disillusioned with the alliance with Catholic France and resentful that he was being continually passed over for promotion. His rivals, likely including Horatio Gates, pushed for court-martials against him for minor offences in a vindictive bid to damage his career. Washington, who regarded Arnold with trust and respect, saw that the court-martials were a deliberate attempt to smear him, and only lightly punished Arnold while promising high command in the future. But the damage had been done, and it was at this point that Arnold asked for, and received, the command of West Point. The fortifications at West Point sits on a key strategic location on the Hudson River, controlling a critical supply route and access deep into New England. If the British could gain control of it, Clinton would have serious options for further offensives, while putting Washington in a strategic dilemma. Arnold, feeling betrayed by his own army and Congress, begins to seek contact with the British through his wife's loyalist connections in the summer of 1780. This soon leads him to Major Andre, and the two begin devising a plan for his defection. With his command at West Point and British forces close by, their plan called for a British strike against the fortifications, which Arnold would promptly surrender along with its 3,000-strong garrison. Importantly, the attack was to occur when Washington visited in September. The capture of Washington, along with the forts, would have devastating consequences for the Continentals, which Clinton hoped would lead to the end of the war. The plot is not going unnoticed, however, and Talmash receives reports from Townsend and the Culper Ring regarding Arnold's suspicious activity. Andre too is soon reported in the New York area, putting Talmadge on alert. To finalize the terms, Andre and Arnold decide to meet in person. Andre, a charming and brave 29-year-old officer, moves over to Patriot lines disguised as a merchant. When they meet, the two men discuss West Point's defenses in detail, and Arnold provides sketches of the forts, along with a pass to travel back through Patriot lines. With Washington planning an imminent visit to West Point, Andre rides back to commence the operation. On his way, he is stopped by a Patriot sentry who tells him to be wary of Loyalist partisans operating in the area. Later on, as Andre moves into no man's land, he is stopped by three men who ask him what side he is on. Andre, misjudging the situation, cheerily asks if they belong to the British party. Unfortunately for Andre, they did not, and he is promptly asked to get off his horse. It is only now that Andre remembers his past from Arnold, but it is too late, and after robbing him and finding the fort sketches, Andre is quickly taken to the nearest Continental camp. A senior officer, although concerned after seeing the drawings and what looks like Arnold's handwriting, feels that he cannot avoid informing his commanding officer, Arnold, about what has happened. Talmadge arrives and is immediately highly suspicious and implores the senior officer not to write to Arnold. But despite his protests, the letter is sent nonetheless to West Point. Arnold has been extremely lucky after almost being fully exposed by both Andre's capture and the Culper Ring. When the letter arrives, he knows full well that the jig is up, and he immediately makes his escape, galloping away from his old life, friends, and comrades to an uncertain future. The plot and treachery is soon revealed, and Talmadge volunteers to escort his opposite number and fellow spy master Andre away from the front line. The two get on well and admire each other, swapping old stories along the way. Talmadge describes an old school friend from Yale. This old friend, sent on a daring mission, had been captured behind enemy lines by the British years earlier, and unceremoniously hanged for spying. His name was Nathan Hale. Andre remarked, "Surely you do not consider his case and mine alike," but Talmadge did and told him so. Despite being well liked and respected by his captors, including by Washington, Andre too would be hanged. His loss would be mourned by both sides, but such a plot had to be answered for, and spies knew full well the risks they were taking. In the end, and like Hale, Andre would meet his fate with bravery, watched on by a crying Talmadge. For so many spies, including some of those in the Culper Ring, once the war was over, they went back to their old lives, never telling a soul about their wartime activity. Their heroism would go both underappreciated and forgotten. For others, including Arnold, they would never be able to escape their past, and forever be burdened by their fateful actions. Wars cannot be won on just the battlefield, and the role of spies undoubtedly played a decisive factor in the outcome of the war. Washington and the Continentals faced in many respects a superior opponent, but through the use of intelligence to avoid traps, take advantage of British weaknesses, and build alliances abroad, piece by piece, vital advantages were won. As one British agent would later put it, Washington did not really outfight the British, he simply outspied us. Thank you for watching our series on the American Revolution, and of course, a huge thanks as well to our Patreon and YouTube supporters. Join now to get early access and vote on future videos. Thanks again, and until next time.